This is CPR News. Come to CPR.org for news from all around Colorado. There's the latest on the pandemic and the state's vaccine rollout. Coloradans can now get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine again. And a couple of the state's elected representatives reflect on 20 years of U.S. fighting in Afghanistan. Congressman Jason Crow and State Representative David Ortiz both served in Afghanistan. That's at CPR.org.
This is The Takeaway from WNYC and PRX in collaboration with WGBH Radio in Boston.
And we're back. I'm Nancy Solomon in for Tanzina Vega. We continue our conversation regarding so-called anti-protesting laws around the country. We're joined by Nora Benavides from PEN America and Ellie Page from the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law and its U.S. Protest Law Tracker. So, Nora, let's start with you. It seems like a majority of these laws are trying to protect private property from vandalism. Is that an accurate assessment of what's going on?
I think these proposals are trying to do a lot, actually, whether it's protecting private property or making penalties so steep for someone that would be obstructing traffic, or even strip people of their public benefits and access to state benefits that they feel they can't really protest. Many of these contain so many disparate and far-reaching provisions. It isn't just about protecting property. It's about fundamentally making people feel like the risk of protesting is so great that they likely shouldn't do it.
Now, of course, there are laws on the books already for protecting property or, and arson, violence. Are there any places where there needs to be improvement, where things happen during protests where we need tighter laws?
That's one of my favorite questions. And no, all of these states have existing misdemeanor laws on the books, which means if you do obstruct traffic, that is already a low-level misdemeanor in all of these states. The proposals that we're talking about today are really just juicing up the penalties for people for things that already exist as criminal penalties, and often will just, be further reason for people to think twice. So it's such a good question, and I think it really kind of begs the bigger question of why legislators are doing this.
Ellie, are people around the country challenging these laws? What's going on to fight back against them?
Yeah, so we know that where these laws have passed, already in Florida, where DeSantis signed their new law last week, already folks have brought constitutional challenges against the law. And we know that advocates are gearing up in other states where these laws are threatening to pass to do the same. But it's risky. Litigation is not a sure thing. And I think the number one priority and challenge right now is ensuring that these bills don't pass in the first place. We have an overwhelming wave of legislation. We've seen over 90 bills introduced in 35 states since last summer. It's an unprecedented wave, both in terms of the number of bills introduced, the extent to which they're moving through legislatures and passing, and the extreme lengths they go to restrict and chill protest rights.
Do you have a number of how many states? 90 bills spread across how many states?
35 states.
Wow, that's a lot. Yep. So, Nora, what are the First Amendment implications of these types of laws?
Well, everyone often feels like protest is, an activity for people who feel otherwise that their voices aren't heard. And I think it's important for us to take a step back and remember why we protest. We often come together, we express ourselves when we feel like our cause is one that is not getting attention or recognition. And so it's important to see that our First Amendment rights, and specifically the freedom of assembly, is one that we really should be upholding, protecting, and viewing as sacred in this country, because it's so fundamental to the way that we conceive of how we engage with democracy.
Maybe we should get rid of the second for a little while before we start whittling on the first.
Would,
how do you like that?
In some way make it harder to come out and demonstrate. Not all
We
of
can
these
start arresting
proposals,
you
however,
congressmen and stuff for
I would say
treason.
slam dunk
We can start arresting
unconstitutional
y'all.
proposals.
Y'all wait and
They
see.
often
We
are
can start arresting
proposals where
police for
I'm worried
terrorism.
about the way they will
Wait and
be
see.
applied. We do not know yet, given that only about 20% of the anti-protest bills proposed since 2017 have actually become law.
Yeah, this is
We're
all
still in
scary,
a
and you're not
holding
going to get
pattern.
away
We're
with
waiting
it, but
to
we're
see
going to
how
keep
some
track of
these
the people
bills will be
trying to do it.
applied by law enforcement. But Florida
No,
was
we're not
so
going to have
quick to
law
pass
enforcement.
this.
We're
The
going to get
governor
rid
was
of it.
so explicit
Y'all
in
wait
his
and
saying
see.
that we are targeting the Black Lives Matter protests and George Floyd protests that I think it's really an easy conclusion to see how these proposals, even if they are maybe able to pass constitutional muster, they will actually be applied in incredibly uneven ways, targeting specific speech and specific movements.
Maybe we should target those Republicans first and get them out of here, get them into camps, get them locked up for life.
No challenge.